The ship was quiet that night. Lieutenant Jake Morgan walked through the long hallways of the horizon, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. He had been on this diplomatic vessel for 3 months now, and he still was not used to how empty it felt after midnight. Jake was 28 years old, with brown hair that never stayed neat and green eyes that always seemed to be smiling at some private joke. He was not the best soldier on the ship. He was not the strongest, but everyone liked him because he was kind, and kindness was something that could not be taught. The delegation had arrived 2 weeks ago. They came from a powerful empire that controlled 40 star systems, and humanity wanted very badly to be their friends. They were tall and beautiful, with silver-blue skin that seemed to glow softly in any light. Their eyes were large and purple, and they moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy in comparison. Jake had seen many aliens in his time in space, but they were different. They were cold, not in a mean way, but in a distant way. They did not smile. They did not laugh. They spoke in formal sentences and kept their hands folded in front of them at all times. It was like they were afraid to show any feeling at all. Among the delegation was Princess Eth, the third daughter of the High Emperor. She was perhaps the most beautiful being Jake had ever seen. Her silver-blue skin was flawless, and her violet eyes held a depth that made him feel like she could see right through him. But she was also the coldest of them all. She never spoke to humans unless she had to. She never looked at them for longer than necessary. She was like a statue made of ice and starlight. Jake's job was simple. He was part of the security team, which meant he stood in hallways and watched doors and tried not to fall asleep during long meetings. It was boring work, but it was important. The alliance between humans and could change everything for both species. On that quiet night, Jake was doing his final round before his shift ended. He walked through the observation deck, a large room with windows that showed the stars outside. It was his favorite place on the ship. When he was feeling lonely or confused, he would come here and look at the stars and remember how small his problems really were. But tonight he was not alone. Princess Eth stood by the window, her back to him. She was wearing her ceremonial robes, thin and flowing, made of some fabric that looked like liquid silver. Her long white hair fell down her back like a waterfall of snow. Jake stopped walking. He knew he should leave. The princess probably wanted to be alone, but something made him stay. Then he noticed that she was shaking. The observation deck had been having problems with its heating system. The maintenance crew had tried to fix it twice, but the temperature still dropped at night. Jake barely noticed it because he was used to cold weather. He had grown up in Minnesota, where winters could freeze your breath in the air. But they came from a warm world. Their planet was covered in jungles and hot springs. They did not have winter. They did not know cold. And here was their princess, shaking like a leaf in a storm, too proud to leave and admit weakness. Jake did not think about what he did next. He did not consider the politics or the protocols or the 100 reasons why it might be a bad idea. He simply walked up behind her, took off his navy jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The princess spun around so fast that Jake took a step back. Her violet eyes were wide with shock. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Jake held up his hands and smiled. "Sorry, you looked cold, that is all." The princess did not move. She did not speak. She just looked at him like he had done something impossible. "It is just a jacket," Jake said, starting to feel nervous. "You can give it back tomorrow or keep it. I have others." His communicator buzzed on his belt. There was some small problem in the cargo bay that needed his attention. Jake looked at the princess one more time, gave her a little wave, and walked away. He did not look back. If he had, he would have seen the princess lift the collar of the jacket to her face. He would have seen her close her eyes and breathe in deeply. He would have seen the first crack appear in her icy mask. But Jake saw none of this. He just went to the cargo bay, solved the small problem, and went to bed thinking it had been a normal night. He was very wrong. The next morning started with Commander Lisa Grant calling him into her office. Lisa was a serious woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been in the Navy for 30 years and she had seen everything. But today, even she looked surprised. "Morgan," she said as Jake sat down, "do you have any idea what you did last night?" Jake thought about it. "I helped fix a broken sensor in Cargo Bay 3. Before that, I did my rounds." "And during your rounds?" Jake suddenly remembered. "Oh, I gave the princess my jacket. She was cold." Lisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Let me tell you something about culture, Lieutenant. When I give someone their personal garment, it means something. It means they are offering protection. It means they are saying, 'I will keep you safe. I will put your comfort before my own.' It is one of the most meaningful gestures in their entire culture." Jake felt his face go pale. "I did not know that." "I know you did not know that. Everyone knows you did not know that. The question is, what do we do about it now?" "Can I apologize? Explain that it was a mistake?" Lisa shook her head slowly. "That is the strange part, Morgan. The princess has not complained. In fact, she has not returned your jacket. She wore it to breakfast this morning. She is wearing it right now as we speak." Jake did not know what to say. "Whatever you started," Lisa said, "it seems the princess does not want it to stop. So for now, just try not to cause any more diplomatic incidents. Can you do that?" Jake nodded and left her office in a daze. As he walked through the ship, he noticed people looking at him and whispering. Some smiled. Some looked confused. Everyone seemed to know something he did not. Then he saw her. Princess Eth was walking down the corridor with her attendants. Her silver robes flowed behind her like water, and over her shoulders, looking completely out of place against all that alien elegance, was his old Navy jacket. Their eyes met. Jake expected her to look away. He expected coldness or anger or embarrassment. Instead, the princess looked at him for a long moment. Then she inclined her head slightly, the smallest nod, and continued walking. Jake stood frozen in the hallway, his heart beating fast. He had a feeling that his life had just changed forever. He just did not know how yet. 3 days had passed since Jake gave his jacket to the princess. 3 days of whispers and stares and questions he could not answer. 3 days of seeing her walk through the ship wearing his worn Navy jacket over her beautiful silver robes. The whole ship was talking about it. The human crew found it funny at first, then sweet, then fascinating. The delegates found it confusing and concerning. Their princess, a member of the royal family, was wearing the clothing of a common human soldier. It was unheard of. Jake tried to stay out of sight. He took different routes through the ship. He ate his meals at odd hours. He volunteered for extra shifts in parts of the vessel where the never went. But somehow, no matter how hard he tried, he kept running into her. She never spoke to him. She never stopped walking. But every time their eyes met, she would give him that small nod, and Jake would feel his heart skip a beat. On the 4th day, everything changed. Jake was sitting alone in the mess hall, eating a sandwich and reading a book on his tablet. It was late afternoon and the room was mostly empty. He liked it this way. No stares, no questions, just peace and quiet. Then a shadow fell over his table. He looked up and almost choked on his food. Princess Eth was standing in front of him. She was alone, without her usual group of attendants. And yes, she was still wearing his jacket. "May I sit?" she asked. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Jake jumped to his feet so fast that he nearly knocked over his drink. "Yes, of course, please." The princess sat down across from him with perfect grace. Jake sat back down, feeling clumsy and awkward. He did not know what to do with his hands, so he put them on the table, then took them off, then finally just sat on them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The princess studied him with those deep violet eyes. Jake tried to look calm, but his heart was beating so loud he was sure she could hear it. "You confuse me," she finally said. Jake blinked. "I am sorry." "Do not apologize. It is not an insult. It is simply a fact." She tilted her head slightly, like a bird examining something strange. "I have studied humans for many years. I thought I understood your species, but you have done something I cannot explain." "The jacket," Jake said. "Yes, the jacket." She touched the collar gently. "On my world, such a gesture would take years to earn. There would be ceremonies, contracts, formal agreements between families. It would be a matter of great importance, discussed and debated and analyzed from every angle." She paused, her violet eyes fixed on his green ones. "But you did it without thinking. You saw that I was cold and you acted. There was no calculation, no expectation of reward. You simply gave." Jake shrugged, feeling embarrassed. "It was nothing, really. I grew up in a place where winters are hard. We learn to look out for each other. If you see someone cold, you help them. It is just what you do." "Just what you do," the princess repeated slowly, "as if kindness costs nothing, as if caring for strangers is as natural as breathing." "Is it not?" The princess was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. We are taught that emotions are dangerous. Love can be used against you. Kindness can be seen as weakness. We learn to control everything we feel, to hide it behind masks of formality and distance. It is the only way to survive in the royal court." Jake felt a sudden sadness for her. This beautiful, powerful princess who had never known simple kindness. "That sounds lonely," he said. "It is," she admitted. "But I never knew how lonely until you put this jacket on my shoulders and walked away without asking for anything in return." She touched the jacket again, and Jake noticed that her fingers were trembling slightly. "It smells like you," she said, "like warmth and something else, something I do not have a word for." "What does it smell like?" She thought about it. Safety, belonging, home perhaps, though I am not sure what home means. She looked at him. "I have servants who would die for me, guards who would kill for me, but none of them have ever made me feel what this jacket makes me feel." Jake did not know what to say. He was just a lieutenant. He was nobody special. He fixed broken sensors and stood in hallways and tried not to cause trouble. He was not equipped to handle conversations about feelings with alien princesses. "You can keep it," he said, because he could not think of anything else. "The jacket, it looks better on you than it ever did on me." The princess smiled. Jake had never seen her smile before. It transformed her face completely. The coldness melted away, and for a moment she looked young and hopeful and achingly vulnerable. "You say these things so easily," she said, "as if they mean nothing, but they mean everything, Jake Morgan, everything." She stood up, and Jake stood with her. "I must go," she said. "My absence will be noticed, and there will be questions I am not ready to answer. But I wanted you to know that what you did that night on the observation deck was not nothing to me. It was everything." She reached out and touched his hand, just for a second. Her fingers were cool against his skin, but the touch sent warmth spreading through his entire body. Then she was gone, walking out of the mess hall with her perfect grace, his old jacket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Jake sat back down slowly. His sandwich was cold now, and he had lost his appetite anyway. He stared at the table for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. He had given a princess his jacket because she was cold. That was all. A simple act of human kindness, the kind of thing he had done 100 times before for 100 different people. But for her, it had meant something else entirely. It had been a crack in a wall she had spent her whole life building, a door opening into a world she had never known existed. Jake thought about what she had said, about emotions being dangerous, about kindness being weakness, about hiding behind masks to survive. What kind of world produced people like that? What kind of life was it, where something as simple as a jacket could shake someone to their core. He thought about his own childhood, about his mother, who always had cookies ready when he came home from school, about his father, who taught him to fish and never got angry when he failed, about his neighbors, who brought food when someone was sick and shoveled each other's driveways after snowstorms. He had grown up surrounded by kindness. He had never questioned it, never thought about it, never realized how lucky he was. Kindness was just the air he breathed. It was everywhere. But for Princess Eth, kindness was as rare and precious as diamonds. She had lived her whole life without it, and now that she had tasted it, she did not want to let go. Jake looked at his hands, the same hands that had draped a jacket over a shivering princess, without a second thought. Maybe, he thought, kindness was more powerful than he had ever imagined. Maybe it could change people. Maybe it could change everything. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if he would ever speak to the princess again, but he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to ask for his jacket back. A week had passed, and the negotiations were going badly. Jake stood in the corner of the conference room, watching the diplomats argue. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Daniel Hayes, wanted fair trade terms and mutual cooperation. The delegation, led by High Counselor, wanted control and dominance. Every day they sat across from each other at the long table and talked in circles. Every day they made no progress. Every day the tension grew thicker. Jake was not a diplomat. He did not understand all the complicated language they used or the subtle games they played. But even he could see that things were falling apart. The only bright spot was the princess. She still wore his jacket, every day, to every meeting. Her attendants had stopped trying to make her remove it. The other delegates had stopped commenting on it. It had become simply part of who she was now. And she had started talking to him. Not in public, of course. That would cause too many problems. But late at night, when the ship was quiet and everyone else was asleep, she would find him on the observation deck. They would stand by the windows and talk for hours about everything and nothing. She told him about her world, about the great crystal cities that rose from the jungle floors, about the hot springs where her people went to meditate, about the strict rules and formal ceremonies that governed every moment of royal life. He told her about Earth, about snow and rain and the changing of the seasons, about baseball games and backyard barbecues, about how his mother still sent him care packages full of homemade cookies, even though shipping costs to deep space were ridiculous. She laughed when he told her that. Actually laughed, a sound like bells ringing. Jake thought it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. But while their friendship grew, the negotiations continued to crumble. On the 8th day, High Counselor stood up from the table with anger in his eyes. "Enough," he said. "We have wasted too much time on this foolishness. The Empire does not beg for partnerships. If humanity cannot meet our terms, then there will be no alliance." Ambassador Hayes stood as well. "We are not begging, Counselor. We are asking for fairness. Your terms would make us little more than servants to your empire." "And what is wrong with that?" sneered. "You are a young species. You should be grateful that we are willing to deal with you at all." The room went silent. Jake saw the human delegates clench their fists. He saw the delegates smile with cold satisfaction. The alliance was dying right in front of him. Then Princess Eth stood up. Everyone turned to look at her. She had not spoken once during any of the negotiations. Her role was ceremonial, a symbol of the Empire's respect for this potential partnership. She was not supposed to have opinions. "Counselor," she said, her voice calm but clear, "may I speak?" Looked surprised. "Princess, this is not your place. These are matters for the council to decide." "I am aware of my place, Counselor, but I am also a daughter of the Emperor, and I have the right to be heard." A tense silence fell over the room. Politics were complicated. Could not refuse her without causing a scene. After a long moment, he nodded stiffly. "Thank you." The princess turned to face both delegations. "I have been on this ship for many days now. I have observed these humans closely, and I believe we are making a terrible mistake." His eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself, princess." "We come to these negotiations demanding submission. We treat these humans as lesser beings who should be grateful for our attention, but we are wrong to do so." She touched the jacket she wore, Jake's jacket, and her voice grew stronger. "In my time here, I have learned something important about humanity. They have a quality that we do not have. They call it kindness, but that word does not capture what it truly means." She looked at Jake just for a moment, and he felt his heart swell. "A human gave me his jacket because he saw that I was cold. He asked for nothing in return. He did not try to use it as leverage or as a bargaining chip. He simply helped me because it was the right thing to do." She turned back to face. "At first I thought this was weakness. I thought that surely no one could be so foolish as to give without expecting something back. But I was wrong. It is not weakness. It is strength of a kind we do not understand." The room was completely silent now. Every eye was on the princess. Humans build connections. They form bonds. They trust easily, and yes, sometimes that trust is betrayed. But more often it creates something beautiful, something lasting. They have spread across the stars not through conquest but through friendship. They make allies everywhere they go because they treat others with genuine warmth. She stepped away from the table and stood in the middle of the room. "The Empire is powerful. We have ships and weapons and technology that could crush humanity in a day. But power alone cannot build a civilization. Power alone cannot create art or music or joy. Power alone is cold and empty and lonely." Her violet eyes were bright now, filled with emotion that were never supposed to show. "I have been cold my entire life. I never knew it until I felt warmth. And now that I have felt it, I cannot go back to the way things were. I will not go back." She looked at Ambassador Hayes. "Humanity has something precious, something we need. Not your resources or your technology, but your kindness, your ability to see strangers as friends waiting to be made, your willingness to give without taking." Then she looked at, "If we walk away from this alliance, we will remain powerful, but we will also remain alone. And I am tired of being alone, counselor. I am tired of living behind walls of ice. I want to learn how to be warm." The silence stretched on, then slowly sat back down. "Perhaps," he said, his voice stiff but thoughtful, "we have been too hasty in our demands. Perhaps there is room for further discussion." Ambassador Hayes nodded. "We would welcome that, counselor." And just like that, the negotiations started again. Jake watched from his corner, his eyes on the princess. She was still standing in the middle of the room, still wearing his jacket. She caught his gaze and gave him the smallest smile. He smiled back. Neither of them knew what would happen next. The negotiations were far from over, and there were still many obstacles to overcome. But something had changed today. A door had opened that could never be closed again. And it had all started with a jacket on a cold night. 2 weeks after the princess's speech, the negotiations were finally making real progress. Both sides had agreed to compromise. Trade routes were being drawn up. Treaties were being written. Hope was in the air. But Jake knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The High Emperor himself was going to join the final session via holographic communication. He wanted to see the treaty before it was signed. He wanted to meet the humans who would become allies of his empire. And he wanted to see his daughter. The princess had told Jake about her father during one of their late-night talks on the observation deck. The High Emperor was a hard man, cold and distant, even by standards. He had ruled his empire for 200 years with an iron fist, and he did not tolerate weakness of any kind. She had also told Jake that she was afraid. Not of her father's anger. She could handle anger. She was afraid of his disappointment. She had spent her whole life trying to earn his approval, and she had never quite managed to do it. Now, by wearing a human's jacket and speaking out in the negotiations, she had done something that might make him lose respect for her forever. "I do not care about the politics," she had told Jake. "I care about him seeing me as weak. I care about him thinking I have failed our people." Jake had taken her hand then. It was the first time he had touched her on purpose, and his heart had raced as he did it. "You are the strongest person I have ever met," he had said. "Standing up for what you believe in when everyone expects you to stay silent. That takes real courage. Your father should be proud of you." She had squeezed his hand and said nothing, but her eyes had been wet with tears she would never let fall. Now, the day of the final session had arrived. The conference room had been transformed. New lighting had been installed to accommodate the holographic projector. Extra chairs had been brought in for all the diplomats and officials who wanted to witness this historic moment. Security was tight, with armed guards at every door. Jake stood at his usual spot in the corner, but today he felt different. Today, he was not just a bored security guard watching diplomats talk. Today, he was watching someone he cared about face her greatest fear. The princess entered the room with her usual grace, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. She was still wearing his jacket. Of course she was. She had not taken it off once since that first night. The human delegation took their seats. The delegation took theirs. And then the holographic projector hummed to life, and the High Emperor appeared. He was massive. Even as a projection, he dominated the room. His silver-blue skin was darker than his daughter's, marked with the lines of age. His violet eyes were hard and cold like frozen amethysts. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed with precious metals and ancient symbols. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like thunder. "I have come to see what my delegation has accomplished," he said. "Show me this treaty that you believe is worthy of the Empire." Ambassador Hayes stood and began presenting the terms. The High Emperor listened without expression, asking questions occasionally, making notes on a tablet that floated beside him. He seemed satisfied with what he heard. Then his eyes found his daughter. "Eth," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade, "come forward." The princess stood and walked to the center of the room. She moved with perfect poise, but Jake could see her hands trembling slightly at her sides. The High Emperor's eyes traveled over her, taking in every detail. They stopped at the jacket. "What is that you are wearing?" The room fell silent. Every diplomat, every guard, every observer held their breath. "It is a jacket, father," the princess said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. "It belongs to a human officer on this ship." "A human's garment." The High Emperor's voice was flat. "You wear a human's garment over your royal robes, in front of the entire delegation, in front of me." "Yes, father." "Remove it." The princess did not move. "Remove it," the High Emperor repeated, his voice growing dangerous. "Now." "No." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jake saw the delegates go pale. He saw the human delegates exchange worried glances. No one said no to the High Emperor. No one. "What did you say to me?" The Emperor's projection flickered with what might have been rage. The princess lifted her chin. "I said no, father. I will not remove this jacket." "You dare to defy me, in front of strangers, in front of lesser beings." "They are not lesser beings." The princess's voice grew stronger. "That is what I have been trying to tell everyone. That is what this jacket means." She touched the worn fabric, and Jake felt his heart ache with pride and fear. "A human gave me this jacket because he saw that I was cold. He did not ask for anything in return. He did not try to use it to gain favor or power. He simply helped me because it was the right thing to do." She took a step toward her father's projection. "I have lived my entire life in the royal court. I have seen power and politics and manipulation. I have seen people pretend to care while plotting betrayal. I have never, not once, experienced genuine kindness until I came to this ship." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "This jacket is the first gift anyone has ever given me without wanting something back. It is the first time anyone has ever looked at me and seen a person instead of a princess. It is proof that there is another way to live, a way that does not require walls and masks and endless loneliness." She was crying now, tears streaming down her silver-blue cheeks. Jake wanted desperately to go to her, to hold her, to protect her, but he knew this was her battle to fight. "I will not remove this jacket, Father. I will not pretend that it means nothing, and I will not be ashamed of learning how to be kind." The High Emperor stared at his daughter for a long, terrible moment. Then he did something that no one expected. He smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was there. "You remind me of your mother," he said quietly. "She also had the courage to defy me. She also believed that kindness was strength." The princess blinked in surprise. "Mother never told me that. She died before she could." The emperor's voice was soft now, almost gentle. "I have ruled this empire for 200 years, daughter. I have conquered worlds and crushed rebellions and built the greatest civilization in the galaxy, but I have never been happy. I have never felt warm." He looked at the jacket his daughter wore. "Perhaps it is time for our people to learn a new way. Perhaps you can teach us." The princess was sobbing openly now, and Jake could feel tears on his own cheeks as well. "Sign the treaty," the High Emperor said to his delegation. "Full partnership, equal terms, and when it is done, send my daughter home. She has much work to do." He paused, his eyes finding Jake in the corner. "And bring the human who gave her the jacket. I would like to meet the man who taught my daughter how to feel." Then the projection flickered and disappeared, leaving behind a room full of shocked, crying, laughing diplomats. The princess turned and looked at Jake. He smiled at her, his heart full to bursting. She smiled back, and even through her tears, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The treaty was signed 3 days later in a ceremony that was broadcast across both human and space. Billions watched as Ambassador Hayes and High Counselor pressed their hands to the glowing document, sealing an alliance that would change the course of history. Jake watched from the back of the room, wearing his dress uniform for the first time in months. He felt uncomfortable in it. He was not used to being noticed, and today, everyone was noticing him. The news had spread quickly. The story of the human lieutenant who gave his jacket to an alien princess had captured the imagination of people across the galaxy. Some called it romantic. Some called it foolish. Some called it the most important act of diplomacy in human history. Jake just thought of it as helping someone who was cold. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Diplomats mingled and drank and congratulated each other on a job well done. Jake tried to hide in a corner, but people kept coming up to shake his hand or pat him on the back or ask him questions about the princess. He answered as politely as he could, but his eyes kept searching the room for her. He found her standing by the window, alone as always. She was wearing a formal gown tonight, silver and flowing, covered in tiny crystals that caught the light. But over her shoulders, as always, was his old navy jacket. Jake walked over to her, and the crowd seemed to part around him, giving them space. "Hey," he said. "Hey yourself," she replied. They stood side by side, looking out at the stars. "So," Jake said, "I hear you are going home tomorrow." "Yes. My father has given me a new role. I am to be the ambassador of change, he called it. I am supposed to teach our people how to be kind." "That is a big job." "It is," she paused. "I am terrified." Jake looked at her. "You, terrified, the woman who stood up to her father in front of the whole empire." "That was different. That was just one moment of courage. This is a lifetime of work." She turned to face him. "What if I fail? What if I cannot change anything? What if kindness really is weakness and I am just fooling myself? Jake reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, as always, but they warmed quickly in his grip. "Let me tell you something," he said. "On Earth there is a saying. You cannot move a mountain in one day, but you can move it one rock at a time. You do not have to change your whole civilization by yourself. You just have to change one person. And then that person changes another and another and another." He squeezed her hand. "You already changed your father. I saw it in his eyes. The man who spoke to you at the end was not the same man who started that conversation. That is not nothing. That is everything." The princess looked at him with those deep violet eyes, and Jake felt like he could fall into them and never come out. "Come with me," she said. Jake blinked. "What?" "Come with me, be my advisor, my friend, my teacher." She stepped closer to him. "I cannot do this alone, Jake. I need someone to remind me what kindness looks like. I need someone who can show my people that warmth is possible. I am just a lieutenant. I am nobody special. You need diplomats and scholars and important people. I need you." Her voice was firm. "You are the one who started all of this. You are the one who showed me another way to live. I do not want anyone else. I want you." Jake's heart was pounding. He thought about his life, his career in the Navy, his family back on Earth, his comfortable little existence that had never asked too much of him. Then he thought about her courage, her vulnerability, her smile that could light up a room, her hand in his, cool but warming. It was not a difficult choice. "Okay," he said. Her eyes went wide. "Okay, just like that." "Just like that," he grinned. "You said you wanted me to teach your people about kindness. Well, lesson 1. When someone you care about asks for help, you say yes. No hesitation, no calculation, you just say yes." The princess laughed, that beautiful bell-like sound that Jake had come to love. "See," she said, "this is why I need you. I never would have thought of that." "Stick with me, Your Highness. You will learn all kinds of things." They were still holding hands. Neither of them made any move to let go. "There is something I need to tell you," the princess said. "Something important." Jake felt a flutter of nervousness. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "On my world, we do not say the words that humans use. We do not say I love you. We believe that such words are too powerful, too dangerous to speak out loud." "Okay," Jake said slowly. "But I want to say them." Her voice was trembling. "I want to learn how. I want to be brave enough to put into words what I feel when I look at you, when I wear your jacket, when you hold my hand." She stepped even closer, until they were almost touching. "I do not know how to say it yet, but I am trying, and I want you to know that I am trying." Jake felt his eyes growing wet. He reached up and touched her face, her silver blue skin cool and soft under his fingers. "You do not have to say it," he said. "Not with words anyway. You say it every time you put on that jacket. You say it every time you look at me. You say it every time you choose to be kind, even when it is hard." He leaned in and rested his forehead against hers. "I will wait as long as it takes," he said, "and when you are ready I will be here." The princess closed her eyes and smiled. Around them, the reception continued. Diplomats laughed and talked and celebrated the new alliance. But Jake and Eth stood in their own little world, holding each other, a human and an alien princess connected by something as simple as a jacket on a cold night. The next morning, they boarded the ship together. Jake looked back at the horizon one last time, at the ship that had been his home for months, at the life he was leaving behind. He did not feel sad. He felt excited. He felt hopeful. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The princess stood beside him, still wearing his jacket. She slipped her hand into his. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jake nodded, ready. The ship's engines hummed to life, and they began the journey too. Behind them, Earth grew smaller in the. Ahead of them lay a new world, a new civilization, a new challenge. But they would face it together. Because that was what kindness meant. It meant being there for each other. It meant giving without expecting anything in return. It meant believing that warmth could melt even the coldest heart. Jake had given a princess his jacket as a joke, just a simple act on a cold night. Now that jacket had changed 2 civilizations and brought 2 people together across the vastness of space. It was funny, he thought, how the smallest gestures could have the biggest consequences. It was funny how something as simple as kindness could change the whole universe. He squeezed Ev's hand, and she squeezed back. The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibility. And somewhere in the warmth of his old navy jacket, a princess smiled and learned, for the first time, what it meant to be truly loved.